If that rifle stays on the ground another minute, none of us are leaving this mountain. The voice was calm. Almost too calm for a battlefield where death seemed to arrive with every passing second. High above a narrow valley in eastern Afghanistan, Viper team lay scattered behind broken limestone boulders, trapped beneath the watchful eye of an enemy sniper no one could find. The morning mission had started before sunrise. A routine reconnaissance patrol. Simple. Quiet. At least, that had been the plan. Now the mountains echoed with rifle fire, desperate radio calls, and the sharp crack of bullets striking stone. Chief Daniel Hayes pressed himself against a fractured rock as another round shattered the cliff above him. Dust rained over his helmet while splinters of limestone bounced across his shoulders. "Status," he shouted. "Mercer's wounded. Medics pinned. We still can't locate the shooter." Another transmission came through. Then silence. Hayes slowly looked toward the eastern ridgeline. Chief Sniper Ethan Collins hadn't answered. His Barrett M82 rested beside him on the rocky slope, the heavy rifle partially buried beneath loose gravel. Collins himself lay motionless, one hand frozen only inches from the weapon's sling. Nobody needed to check. Everyone already knew. The team's last sniper was gone. Without Collins, the enemy owned the valley. Their M4 carbines couldn't reach that distance. The machine gun rounds disappeared harmlessly against the mountainside. Air support had diverted because thick clouds now covered the surrounding peaks. The sniper understood all of it. He wasn't trying to eliminate the team quickly. He was hunting them. One patient shot at a time. Another rifle crack echoed through the canyon. A young SEAL cried out as a bullet slammed into the rocks beside him, spraying fragments across his face. The medic instinctively crawled forward before another round forced him back into cover. Hayes clenched his jaw. Every option had disappeared. Then someone quietly stood. She wore the same camouflage uniform as everyone else, though her sleeves were stained with dirt and dried blood from treating wounded operators throughout the firefight. Specialist Emily Carter had joined Viper team only 5 days earlier after another logistics technician was injured before deployment. Most of the operators barely knew her name. She rarely spoke during briefings. She stayed in the background. She fixed damaged radios. Moved supplies. Helped the medic. Nothing about her suggested she belonged anywhere near a sniper rifle. Ignoring the shouting around her, Emily stepped carefully between the rocks until she reached Ethan Collins. She knelt beside him first. 2 fingers rested briefly against his neck. No pulse. With quiet respect, she gently closed his hand across his chest. Only then did she turn toward the Barrett. Chief Hayes frowned. "What are you doing?" Emily didn't answer immediately. Another enemy round struck nearby, scattering gravel across her boots. She never flinched. Instead, she looked at the heavy rifle, then calmly raised her eyes toward Hayes. There was no panic in her expression. No desperation. Only quiet certainty. When she finally spoke, her voice carried effortlessly through the chaos. "Give me the rifle." For the rest of his career, Chief Daniel Hayes would remember one sentence more clearly than the gunfire. "Give me the rifle." Not because it sounded heroic. Because it sounded ordinary. As though the woman who spoke those words had simply volunteered for another routine assignment. 2 weeks after the ambush, the base gathered for a quiet memorial ceremony honoring Chief Ethan Collins and the men who had risked everything on that mountain. Rows of soldiers stood at attention beneath a cloudless sky. Helicopter blades turned slowly in the distance. The American flag moved gently in the morning breeze. Colonel Richard Donovan stepped to the podium. He spoke about courage. About sacrifice. About the responsibility every soldier accepted the moment they raised their right hand. When he finished, the crowd stood in silence. One by one, the members of Viper team placed challenge coins beneath Ethan Collins' photograph. Chief Daniel Hayes was the last. As he stepped away, he noticed Emily Carter standing quietly near the back of the formation. Not in the front. Not beside the command staff. Exactly where she always chose to stand. After the ceremony ended, soldiers slowly returned to their daily routines. Maintenance crews rolled equipment across the flight line. Medical teams prepared emergency kits. Supply trucks departed the warehouse. Emily quietly joined them without hesitation. She loaded fresh medical cases into the back of a transport vehicle before helping a young private secure the cargo straps. The private smiled. "Thanks, ma'am." Emily simply nodded. "No problem." He never realized who had just helped him. Chief Hayes watched from across the motor pool. Ryan Mercer walked beside him. "You know, I used to think heroes looked different." Hayes smiled faintly. "So did I." Ryan glanced toward Emily. "She'll probably never tell anyone." Hayes shook his head. "She doesn't have to. Because the people who had been there already knew. They remembered the valley. The impossible silence. The abandoned Barrett lying beside Ethan Collins. They remembered the quiet woman everyone had overlooked stepping forward when no one else could. More importantly, they remembered what happened afterward. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't tell stories. She didn't wear her past like a badge. She simply returned to carrying medical supplies, repairing radios, helping wounded soldiers, and serving wherever she was needed most. Months later, a newly assigned operator asked Hayes about the old Barrett displayed inside the team briefing room. "I heard someone made an unbelievable shot with that rifle." Hayes looked at the weapon for a long moment. Then he answered quietly. "The shot wasn't the remarkable part." The young operator looked confused. "What was?" Hayes smiled. "The person who walked away afterward." Outside the building, Emily crossed the courtyard carrying another box of supplies toward the medical clinic. The afternoon sunlight caught her uniform for only a moment before she disappeared inside. No applause followed. No cameras waited. No headlines were written. And somehow, that made the story even greater. Because true professionalism rarely asks to be noticed. Real strength almost never introduces itself. The finest warriors are often the quietest people in the room. And respect is never earned by rank, appearance, or reputation. It is earned by character. By humility. By choosing responsibility over recognition. On a lonely mountain in Afghanistan, the last SEAL sniper fell. Another soldier quietly picked up his rifle. Then, just as quietly, she put it back down and returned to serving others. That was the moment every member of Viper team finally understood what courage truly looked like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't proud. It was simply a quiet woman who stepped forward when everyone else had run out of hope. The mountain seemed alive. Not because it moved. Because it whispered. Emily Carter settled behind the Barrett M82 as if the rifle had always belonged there. The heavy stock rested naturally against her shoulder while the bipod dug firmly into the rocky ground. Dust drifted across the barrel, carried by a wind that changed direction every few seconds. Behind her, Chief Daniel Hayes watched in complete silence. "What do you see?" he asked. Emily didn't answer. Instead, she reached down, pinched a small amount of fine sand between her fingers, and slowly released it into the air. The grains floated left. Then curved gently toward the valley. She followed them with her eyes. Another enemy round cracked overhead, smashing into a boulder 20 feet away. Fragments showered across the team. Nobody moved. Ryan Mercer glanced nervously toward Emily. "We don't have time for this." Still, she remained calm. Her attention shifted to a torn strip of camouflage fabric caught on a dead branch farther down the slope. It fluttered once, then twice, before hanging motionless. Only then did Emily lower herself behind the scope. Her breathing became almost impossible to notice. Chief Hayes had spent years beside elite snipers. He recognized the transformation immediately. Moments earlier, Emily had been another soldier under fire. Now she had become part of the landscape. She adjusted the rifle only slightly. One hand rested beneath the stock. The other lightly touched the elevation turret. 3 deliberate clicks. Nothing more. Ryan frowned. How does she know? Hayes answered quietly. She isn't guessing. Emily's left eye remained partially open while her right eye looked through the optic. She wasn't searching for a person. She was searching for evidence. A broken shadow. A reflection. A pattern that didn't belong. The valley stretched more than a mile before her. Jagged cliffs. Sunlit stone. Dark crevices. Nothing. Another gust swept across the ridge. Emily waited. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The team around her grew restless. The wounded groaned softly behind cover. The medic looked toward Hayes, silently asking how much longer they could survive. Hayes never answered. He couldn't. Something about Emily's composure told him interrupting her now would be a mistake. Far across the valley, sunlight briefly flashed against a narrow opening between 2 weathered rocks. The reflection lasted less than a second. Most people would never have noticed it. Emily did. Her fingers settled gently against the trigger. Not pulling. Simply resting. She inhaled slowly. Exhaled. At the natural pause between breaths, every muscle in her body became still. No tension. No hurry. Only control. Inside her mind, countless hours of forgotten training quietly returned. Wind. Distance. Temperature. Angle. Every variable aligned without conscious effort. The rifle no longer felt like steel and glass. It felt like an extension of her own body. Chief Hayes raised his binoculars, desperately trying to find what Emily had already seen. Nothing. Only empty rock. Ryan whispered, "Chief. I still don't see anyone." Hayes lowered the binoculars just enough to glance at Emily. "You don't need to. If she sees him." He never finished the sentence. Emily's lips barely moved. "There you are." For the first time since the ambush began, Chief Daniel Hayes stopped seeing a quiet logistics specialist lying behind a borrowed rifle. What he saw instead was someone who understood the language of patience, precision, and distance better than almost anyone he had ever served beside. And somewhere beyond that silent ridgeline, an unseen sniper had just made the smallest mistake of his life. The valley stopped breathing. Emily Carter never noticed. Her world had narrowed to a thin black crosshair floating across distant stone. Every heartbeat faded into the background until only the rhythm of her breathing remained. Chief Daniel Hayes watched from less than 6 feet away. He had expected hesitation. Instead, he saw complete stillness. The Barrett rested naturally against Emily's shoulder. Her support hand lightly squeezed the rear bag beneath the stock, making adjustments so small they were almost invisible. Another enemy round slammed into the rocks 50 yards away. Nobody reacted. Every eye was fixed on Emily. Ryan Mercer swallowed hard. "If you're going to take it, take it." Emily didn't move. "He hasn't committed yet," she said quietly. Hayes frowned. "What?" "The sniper. He's waiting for someone to expose themselves." Her voice remained calm. "He believes we're desperate." She was right. The enemy marksman had spent nearly 40 minutes controlling the entire battlefield. He had no reason to rush now. That confidence would become his mistake. A breeze swept across the ridgeline. Emily watched a cluster of dry grass bend toward the east. Then she noticed something else. High above the valley floor, sunlight reflected from a tiny patch of glass. Not a flash. Just a shimmer. Gone before anyone else could have noticed it. There, she whispered. Hayes immediately raised his binoculars. Nothing. Only weathered rock. No rifle barrel. No helmet. No movement. Emily slowly settled deeper behind the stock. The rifle became perfectly aligned with her body. She inhaled. Halfway. Then released the breath until her lungs rested naturally empty. Her heartbeat slowed. Her finger found the trigger. Not pulling. Simply taking up the slack. Every hour of forgotten training quietly returned. Natural point of aim. Sight picture. Breathing. Trigger control. Follow through. There was no conscious thought anymore. Only instinct refined through thousands of repetitions. Ryan barely breathed. The medic stopped wrapping a bandage. Even the wounded operators looked toward the ridgeline. Time stretched. 1 second. 2. 3. Then the Barrett erupted. The thunder of the .50 caliber rifle rolled through the valley, echoing from cliff to cliff. Dust exploded around the muzzle brake as the rifle drove firmly into Emily's shoulder. She never lifted her head. She remained behind the optic. Watching. Waiting. The bullet continued its journey across more than a mile of broken terrain. For long seconds passed. No one spoke. Then a faint metallic clatter drifted back across the canyon. Hayes adjusted his binoculars again. This time he saw it. A camouflaged rifle slid from behind a narrow rock shelf before disappearing into open space. A body followed. Slowly. Lifelessly. The hidden sniper collapsed forward and vanished behind the cliff. The radio immediately crackled. Overwatch to Viper actual. Static filled the channel. We have thermal confirmation. Another pause. Enemy sniper no longer showing movement. Repeat. Target neutralized. Relief swept through the team like a wave. Operators cautiously lifted their heads. No incoming shot greeted them. The mountain had finally fallen silent. Emily calmly cycled the bolt and ejected the spent casing into her gloved hand. She scanned the surrounding ridgelines once more before quietly saying, "Keep watching." He may not have been alone. Chief Daniel Hayes stared at her with open disbelief. Most soldiers would still be celebrating an impossible shot. Emily Carter was already protecting them from the next threat. Only then did Hayes fully understand. The quiet logistics specialist lying behind the Barrett hadn't become extraordinary that afternoon. She had always been extraordinary. No one had simply looked closely enough to see it. The echo of the Barrett rolled through the valley long after the shot itself had disappeared. No one spoke. Every surviving member of Viper team remained frozen behind the rocks, waiting for the mountain to answer. Emily Carter never lifted her head from the scope. She had learned years ago that a sniper's work was never finished when the trigger broke. It ended only when the target could no longer fight. Her breathing remained slow. Controlled. The crosshairs floated over the distant ridgeline without the slightest tremor. Ryan Mercer whispered before realizing he was counting aloud. 1. Nothing. 2. Only wind. 3. Still silence. Chief Daniel Hayes slowly raised his binoculars toward the narrow gap Emily had been watching. He still couldn't see anything. Only broken cliffs and scattered shadows. Then, almost 4 seconds after the rifle fired, something changed. A long black rifle slipped from behind the rocks. It tumbled once before striking the cliff face below. A motionless body followed. The hidden sniper collapsed forward and disappeared from sight. Hayes lowered the binoculars in disbelief. He got him. The radio immediately crackled. Overwatch to Viper actual. Static hissed across the transmission. We have positive thermal confirmation. A short pause followed. Then the words every operator had been waiting to hear. Enemy sniper eliminated. Repeat. Target neutralized. Relief spread through the team almost instantly. Men who had been trapped beneath enemy fire for nearly an hour cautiously raised their heads. No incoming shot followed. The valley that had felt like a prison only moments earlier suddenly seemed open again. Move. Hayes ordered. Recover Collins. Get the wounded ready. Operators immediately rushed from cover. 2 SEALs sprinted toward Chief Ethan Collins while the medic reached casualties that had been impossible to access minutes before. Across the rocks, Emily calmly worked the Barrett's bolt. The spent casing slid into her gloved hand instead of falling onto the ground. She inspected the chamber. Closed the bolt. Then quietly returned her eye to the optic. Hayes noticed. What are you looking for now? Emily answered without emotion. A second rifle. The words immediately stopped everyone again. Experienced sniper teams rarely operated completely alone. Hayes grabbed his binoculars once more. The surviving SEALs shifted into fresh security positions. For another 30 tense seconds, Emily searched every ridge, every shadow, every piece of broken stone. Finally she lowered the rifle. Nothing. He's alone. Only then did Hayes allow himself to breathe. The rescue helicopters could finally land. Ryan approached Emily carefully. His injured shoulder was stained with blood, but he ignored it. I've seen competition shooters. I've trained beside Marine Scout snipers. I've never seen a shot like that. Emily gently wiped a thin layer of dust from the Barrett's receiver using a clean cloth from her medical pouch. It wasn't about the shot, she replied. Ryan looked confused. What do you mean? She glanced toward Ethan Collins, whose teammates were now carrying him toward the landing zone. It was about giving everyone enough time to go home. The distant sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the valley. Chief Daniel Hayes watched Emily fold the Barrett's bipod before carefully laying the rifle across her knees. She showed the weapon the same respect she had shown the man who once carried it. In that moment, Hayes realized something extraordinary. The quiet logistics specialist who had saved every life on that mountain wasn't thinking about what she had accomplished. She was thinking about the one teammate she hadn't been able to save. And somehow, that humility impressed him even more than the impossible shot. The first rescue helicopter appeared over the western ridge just as the afternoon sun began sinking behind the mountains. Its rotor blades echoed through the valley, stirring clouds of dust across the battlefield. For the first time in nearly an hour, the sound brought relief instead of danger. Chief Daniel Hayes stood from behind the shattered rocks and threw a green smoke grenade toward the landing zone. Bright smoke curled into the sky. LZ secure, he called over the radio. The helicopter circled once before settling onto the uneven ground. Medics rushed out carrying stretchers while the surviving SEALs immediately began loading the wounded. Chief Ethan Collins was carried aboard with quiet dignity. 4 operators lifted him together. No one spoke. They didn't have to. Emily Carter stepped away from the Barrett and gently folded its bipod before placing the rifle across Collins' chest for the journey home. Only after that did she turn toward the living. She knelt beside Ryan Mercer. Can you squeeze my hand? Ryan did. She checked his pulse. Retightened the bandage around his shoulder. Adjusted the sling supporting his injured arm. Then helped him toward the waiting helicopter. Ryan looked at her. I owe you my life. Emily shook her head. You owe Chief Collins. He gave us the time. Her answer surprised him. She had every reason to accept the praise. Instead, she redirected it toward the man who could no longer hear it. Inside the helicopter, Chief Daniel Hayes finally allowed himself to sit. Exhaustion settled over him all at once. Across the cabin, Emily quietly helped the medic stabilize another wounded operator before wiping dried blood from her gloves with a damp cloth. She looked exactly like the logistics specialist who had boarded the mission that morning. As though nothing extraordinary had happened. That unsettled Hayes more than the impossible shot. Most soldiers who accomplished something remarkable carried themselves differently afterward. Emily didn't. She simply returned to helping people. Halfway through the flight, the encrypted mission radio crackled. Viper actual. Hayes answered immediately. This is Hayes. Operations Command responded without delay. We've completed our initial review of the drone footage. A brief silence followed. The director has one question. Hayes glanced toward Emily. She was adjusting in 4-line for one of the wounded and couldn't hear the conversation over the engines. What question? Confirm the identity of the individual who neutralized the enemy sniper. Hayes answered without hesitation. Specialist Emily Carter. Another pause. Longer this time. Then operations spoke again. Stand by. We're transmitting restricted personnel records. Hayes frowned. Restricted? Affirmative. Level black. The transmission ended. A secure notification immediately appeared on the rugged military tablet mounted beside him. Triple authentication required. Hayes entered his credentials. An encrypted file began loading. Across the cabin, Ryan Mercer quietly watched Emily offer a canteen to another injured operator before checking his bandages again. She never stopped working. She never looked around to see whether anyone was watching. Ryan leaned toward Hayes. I still can't believe what happened. Hayes kept his eyes on the loading screen. I don't think we've learned the whole story yet. The progress bar slowly reached 100%. Whatever waited inside that classified file would explain why a quiet logistics specialist had handled a Barrett M82 with the effortless confidence of someone who had spent years mastering one of the most difficult skills in modern warfare. And Chief Daniel Hayes had a feeling the truth was about to change everything he thought he knew about Emily Carter. The helicopter landed just before sunset. Dust rolled across the landing zone as medics rushed toward the wounded. Crew chiefs shouted over the roar of the engines while stretchers disappeared into the aircraft one after another. Chief Daniel Hayes helped carry Ethan Collins aboard first. The fallen sniper's Barrett had already been secured beside him. No one wanted the rifle separated from the man who had carried it through so many missions. When the last casualty was loaded, Hayes turned around. Emily Carter was nowhere near the command group. She was kneeling beside another wounded operator, tightening a bandage that had begun to loosen during the evacuation. Only after she finished did she climb aboard. Inside the helicopter, the mood remained quiet. The only sounds came from the engines, medical equipment, and occasional radio traffic. Ryan Mercer watched Emily move from one injured soldier to another. She checked pulses. Adjusted for tubing. Offered water. Not once did she mention the shot. Not once did she look toward the Barrett. It was as though none of it had happened. That unsettled Hayes more than anything else. Halfway through the flight, the encrypted communications panel lit up. Viper actual. Hayes picked up the headset. This is Hayes. Operations Command answered immediately. We've completed the preliminary battle assessment. Hayes waited. The director has one request. What is it? We need confirmation regarding Specialist Emily Carter. Hayes looked across the cabin. Emily was helping a medic secure an oxygen mask on one of the wounded operators. She couldn't hear the conversation. What confirmation? Was she the individual who neutralized the enemy sniper? Hayes answered without hesitation. Yes. Several seconds passed. Longer than normal. Then the voice returned. Stand by. We're transmitting a restricted personnel file. Hayes frowned. What level? The answer came quietly. Level Black. The transmission ended. A secure notification immediately appeared on the military tablet mounted beside him. Authentication required. Hayes entered his credentials. One security screen disappeared. Then another. Finally, an encrypted personnel record began loading. Across the cabin, Ryan noticed Hayes staring at the screen. What is it? Hayes didn't answer. The loading bar slowly reached completion. The first image appeared. Emily Carter. Several years younger. Wearing a full ghillie suit. A precision rifle rested across her chest. Below the photograph, one line immediately caught Hayes' attention. Long-Range Precision Evaluation Program. He continued reading. Advanced Marksmanship Certifications. Instructor Qualification. Environmental Shooting Assessment. Every evaluation carried exceptional scores. Then another entry appeared. Final standing, highest overall assessment. Hayes stopped scrolling. Even he understood what that meant. No ordinary logistics specialist could possibly have earned qualifications like these. Further down, page after page had been almost completely redacted. Mission reports. Deployment records. Operational summaries. Only one paragraph remained visible. Following Operation Black Ridge, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter voluntarily requested reassignment away from precision engagement duties. Administrative reassignment approved. Hayes slowly looked up from the screen. Emily was still sitting beside the wounded. Still adjusting blankets. Still checking bandages. Completely unaware that her past had quietly returned. Ryan leaned closer. So. Who is she? Hayes looked back at the photograph. Then toward the woman sitting across the helicopter. For the first time since meeting her, he realized the quiet soldier everyone had overlooked had never lacked extraordinary ability. She had simply chosen to carry it in silence. And whatever had happened during Operation Black Ridge was powerful enough to convince one of the military's greatest snipers to spend years making sure no one ever noticed her again. The helicopter landed at the forward operating base just as darkness settled across the mountains. Floodlights illuminated the landing pad while medics hurried the wounded toward the field hospital. The surviving members of Viper Team climbed out slowly, each carrying dust, exhaustion, and memories they would never forget. Emily Carter stepped onto the concrete carrying 2 medical packs instead of her own gear. Before anyone could ask for help, she was already walking beside the stretcher carrying Ryan Mercer. Inside Operations Headquarters, Chief Daniel Hayes placed the encrypted military tablet onto a secure conference table. Colonel Richard Donovan entered a moment later. "I've been waiting for you," he said quietly. Hayes pushed the tablet forward. "I need to know who Emily Carter really is." Donovan inserted his authorization card. The secure personnel file reopened. The first page displayed Emily's official service photograph. The second listed her training history. The third revealed something Hayes had never expected to read. Long-Range Precision Evaluation Program Overall Performance Ranking, first. His eyes continued downward. Extreme Distance Engagement. Advanced Wind Analysis. Instructor Certification. Operational Evaluation. Every category ended with the same assessment. Outstanding. Then the pages changed. Mission reports disappeared beneath thick black redactions. Deployment locations had been removed. Names erased. Entire operations classified beyond Hayes clearance. Only one section remained visible. Following Operation Black Ridge, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter voluntarily requested permanent reassignment away from precision engagement duties. Request approved. Hayes looked up. What happened at Black Ridge? Colonel Donovan remained silent for several moments. When classified missions succeed, he finally said, people usually remember the objective. They rarely remember what it cost. Hayes waited. Emily completed her mission. Everyone agrees on that. The problem is. Donovan paused. She believes the price was too high. No further explanation came. None was needed. Hayes understood. Some burdens never appeared inside official reports. Across the courtyard outside, Emily quietly unloaded fresh medical supplies from a transport truck. She laughed softly as a young private accidentally dropped a box of bandages. She helped him gather everything without mentioning rank or experience. The private thanked her before hurrying away. He had no idea who she really was. Ryan Mercer entered the conference room with his arm still wrapped in fresh bandages. He noticed Emily's personnel file displayed on the screen. So. It was all true. Hayes nodded. Ryan stared at the photograph of Emily wearing a ghillie suit. I kept thinking about the mountain. I couldn't understand why she looked so calm. Colonel Donovan closed the tablet. Because she'd already faced worse. Later that evening, Hayes found Emily outside the medical building. She was replacing supplies inside an emergency trauma bag. He stood beside her. I read your file. Emily zipped the bag closed. I figured you would. Hayes hesitated. You never wanted anyone to know. She looked toward the mountains fading into darkness. I wanted to keep serving. Nothing else mattered. Hayes studied her face. There was no bitterness. No pride. No regret. Only quiet acceptance. At that moment, he realized the most remarkable thing about Emily Carter wasn't that she had once become one of the military's greatest precision shooters. It was that after achieving everything most soldiers only dreamed about, she had willingly chosen a life where no one would ever know her name. Because, in her mind, saving lives had always mattered more than being remembered. 3 days later, the base had settled back into its familiar rhythm. Helicopters came and went. Convoys rolled through the gates. Mechanics repaired vehicles beneath the morning sun. To everyone else, it was another ordinary day. Only the members of Viper team knew something had changed forever. Chief Daniel Hayes walked across the operations yard carrying the classified tablet beneath his arm. The file had been closed, encrypted, and locked away again, but its contents refused to leave his mind. Across the courtyard, Emily Carter unloaded boxes of medical supplies from the back of a transport truck. She worked quietly. Methodically. Exactly as she had before the ambush. A young private struggled with a heavy equipment case. Without saying a word, Emily stepped over, lifted one side, and helped him carry it inside. The soldier smiled. Thanks. Emily returned the smile. You're welcome. He hurried away without asking her name. Hayes watched the exchange in silence. No one around them knew that the woman stacking trauma kits had once ranked first in one of the military's most demanding precision shooting programs. No one knew she had saved an entire SEAL team only days earlier. And Emily seemed perfectly content to keep it that way. Later that afternoon, Hayes found her inside the logistics warehouse checking expiration dates on emergency medical kits. You've been busy, he said. Emily looked up and smiled politely. There's always something that needs doing. Hayes rested against a storage shelf. I've been thinking about Black Ridge. Her hands paused for the first time. Only for a moment. Then she quietly closed the medical kit in front of her. I figured you would. He hesitated before asking the question that had stayed with him ever since reading her file. Do you ever miss it? Emily looked through the open warehouse door toward the distant mountains. The shooting? Hayes nodded. She thought for several seconds. I miss the people. The rifle was never the important part. Her answer surprised him. Then why did you pick it up? Emily's expression softened. Because Ethan couldn't. And someone still had to protect the team. She spoke as though the decision had never belonged to her. As though any soldier would have done the same. Hayes knew better. Most wouldn't have. Ryan Mercer entered the warehouse carrying a stack of maintenance reports. His shoulder had nearly healed. He glanced at Emily before looking toward Hayes. "I've been telling the new guys about the mountain." Emily immediately shook her head. "Please don't." Ryan laughed. "Why not?" She returned another trauma kit to the shelf. "They don't need another story. They need good training. And they need to trust each other." Ryan looked at Hayes. Now he understood. Emily wasn't trying to erase her past. She simply refused to let it become more important than the work still waiting to be done. As evening settled over the base, Emily locked the warehouse and carried one final box of supplies toward the medical clinic. Hayes watched her disappear through the doorway. He realized something the classified file could never fully explain. Greatness wasn't hidden because Emily feared recognition. It remained hidden because, to her, yesterday's achievements could never become an excuse to stop serving today. That quiet decision revealed more about her character than any medal, record, or secret operation ever could. And in the eyes of every surviving member of Viper Team, that was what truly made Emily Carter extraordinary.